Carol.
Just me.
No Linda tonight, huh?
No Linda tonight.
Okay.
Bless you.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Maybe tomorrow night. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, hopefully tomorrow.
All right. Well, that's another reason I'm glad I made it for 2 nights, because maybe we'll get more people still within the 2 nights. But all righty. This is an awesome thing you're going to learn about tonight. It's awesome. Like I said, this is a 3-part thing I put together here. Olivia, did she get it? Did you give her a syllabus?
Yes.
Carol one? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. The syllabus, that's that handout, that's an outline of what we're going to be covering in here over these 2 nights. All right? Most of it's tonight, but there's still quite a bit even tomorrow night we're going to cover as well. And this is about the book Esther. You're going to learn things about Esther and that whole story and how it relates to this country and to what's going on in the world right now and in this country that's just going to blow you away. All right? It's very relevant. It's very prophetic. All right? And start out by saying that it's about, in Judaism we call it the Megillah. Megillah Esther. The Megillah is a Hebrew word. Megillah is not a gorilla. I remember when we were kids, I don't know if you remember Megillah the gorilla and all of his friends, but Megillah is a Hebrew word that means scroll or story. So when they say, give you the whole Megillah, it's the whole story. All right? And it's an M word, and we're going to find out that Purim has these M words, or these mem words. The letter mem, okay? Who is that?
Patty.
Oh,
Can
Tom
I
and
move up
Patty?
in that seat?
Which seat?
That one.
You can come right up here right now.
I
You
love
betcha.
that seat.
You betcha. All right. So I'll go ahead and begin this here.
Oh my God.
Oh, sorry.
I noticed
They
that.
come in and sit.
All right. Start out on I hope you can all see this. Purim Sameach is Happy Purim in Hebrew. Purim Sameach. In Yiddish, it's Freilichen Purim. Freilichen Purim. Freilichen sounds like Freilich, which is the German. But the Yiddish is Freilichen Purim, is the greeting for Happy Purim in Yiddish. And in Hebrew, it's Purim Sameach. And of course, in English, it's Happy Purim. Come on in, Brother Thomas and Sister Pat. Maybe there's plenty of pancakes with that.
She got lost out here somewhere.
All right. So happy Purim, everyone, and here we go. Purim is from the word pur, which is a word that means it has to do with the lots. We're going to find out the casting of lots. But the word pur in Hebrew means to crush and to break. To crush or break. All right? Now we can think of that in the positive sense. The crushing and the breaking of sin, the crushing and the breaking of the evil one and his influence. Of course, it also could be, the crushing and breaking of on the other side of it too, which is not good. But a lot, all right, pur means lot. What is lot? Lot, if you look up the word lot actually has to do with protection and provision. Protection and provision. And the casting of lots. They cast lots, okay? The word cast in Hebrew is Natan, or the boy's name Nathan. Natan. And it means to pour, as in pouring of metals, forging metals and pouring of metals. Or also to write. So we have here a reference to something that is very warlike and has to do with warfare and that kind of a thing, as it's connected to protection and provision. All right? The casting of lots. Now, of course, they cast lots. Haman or Haman, we call him Haman. In Ashkenaz, Yiddish, Jewish, is referred to, we call him Haman. But Haman or Haman, casted the lots on the 13th of Adar for the destruction of the Jews. All right. But a lot itself also, the lots were cast, remember, at the feast of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur. And we're going to find out the connection here between Yom Kippur and Purim. And they don't just sound alike for a reason, because of, just happen to sound alike. There's a connection here, a real connection. The Purim is celebrated on the 14th day of Adar, which is usually in March. It can be in February. February-March. It's a winter feast like Hanukkah. And the 13th of Adar is the day that Haman chose for the extermination of the Jews, and the day that the Jews battled their enemies for their lives. And on the day afterward, the 14th, they celebrated their survival. And in cities that were walled at the time of Joshua, Purim is also celebrated on the 15th of the month, because the book of Esther says that in Shushan, a walled city, deliverance from the massacre was not complete until the next day. So the 15th is also referred as Shushan Purim. Purim, the official date of Purim, is actually 2 days, the 14th and the 15th. The 14th is celebrated for 2 days. Actually, the whole thing is 3 days, but it's technically really the 14th of Adar. Now we're going to learn something about the month Adar. The month Adar is the last month in the Jewish year. The first month is the month Nisan. Nisan is when we celebrate Passover. Passover is about deliverance, right? The last month is Purim. Purim is about deliverance. Isn't that interesting that the first month of the year, they celebrate a deliverance from oppression? And in the last month of the year, they celebrate deliverance from oppression. Now this greatness is hinted in the name of Adar, which is spelled Aleph, Dalet, Resh in Hebrew, Adar. And the Aleph represents the power of God. Aleph is God. God, the strong one. All right? In the natural terms, we think the bowl. All right? Remember, there was the 4 faces of man in Ezekiel. Ezekiel saw 4 faces. It all had to do with the deity of God. One face was a bull, one face was an eagle, one face was man, and one face, there was the eagle, the bull, the man, and let's see, what was it, the eagle?
Lion?
The lion, yes, thank you, the lion, and the lion. 4 faces of man. So, the Aleph represents God, which may seem to be separate from everyday existence. The Dalet and Resh form the word Dar, which means to dwell. So it has to do with God dwelling. The Aleph, or God's unlimited power, aims to create a dwelling place in this limited world. Dwelling place in this limited world. This is the heart of God. The heart of God is to dwell with people, to have fellowship with people, to have communion, intimacy with people. And by the way, Dar is connected to the Hebrew word for beauty, Hadar. Hadar means beautiful in Hebrew. Hadar is beauty or beautiful. The Dar, Hadar, the Dar. What is Dar? Dar in Hebrew is pearl. Pearl of great price. Hadar. So Adar, all right? It's in the month of Adar, the last month of the Jewish year. I'm showing you a picture of Moshe on the mountain. All right? Moses on the mountain. We're going back here because remember I told you that Yom Kippur, or that I should say Purim, that we're celebrating tonight, like the book of Esther, Megillah Esther, that Purim is connected to Yom Kippur. Now Yom Kippur, remember, was the feast that had to do with the second ascension of Moses back up Mount Sinai to get the tablets, and it was a wedding. It was a time of wedding. It was a wedding time for these people, where he's marrying them. Back when the first set of commandments were given, they experienced these outward, overt, obvious supernatural miracles, such as the whole mountain shaking, and the earth was shaking at the time of the giving of the commandments. The blowing of this shofar that was not a human shofar, that sounded, that could literally be heard. The rabbis say this thing was heard all over the planet at the time. The splitting of the Red Sea, and things like the plagues that happened in Egypt. All right? And because of that, God is going to go to the Jewish people, and He's going to propose to and ask the Jewish people to marry. The Jewish people agree to marry God, to have covenant with God. But I'm not saying necessarily all of them didn't get it at that time, but a lot that the rabbis teach, and I understand, and I believe that this is right. They were doing this. They were doing this because it was God reaching down to them, and they were simply terrified of this whole thing, even if it was holy terror, but they were not in their spirits saying, yes, I understand the real significance of this law, and this law is really your love for me. And it was more out of terror and dread that they were responding, and oh yes, we will do this. All right? But something different happens. At Purim, now yes, at Purim they're facing possible extinction because Haman had passed the decree, the king had passed the decree that they were possibly going to lose their lives, that they would all be exterminated and wiped out. So was there duress connected to that? Well, yes, but in that they came to the point, they came to the place where they said, God, we've blown it. We have blown it, and we want a heart change. We are reaching up to you and saying, we understand the importance of your law. So, what is it saying? We're going to get to that. We're going to look at that. Well, first of all, before we do, keep that in mind. It was 1,000 years from Sinai to Esther. From Sinai was around the early 1400s BCE to the time of Esther, which is the early 400s BC. So it's 1,000 years between the time of Sinai and Moses to Esther. Interesting. All right. We're going to skip through this, but we're going to go to for the sake of time. Here's what you have to see. In the book of Esther, the last chapter, it says this, and this is where it's establishing the feast here. It says that the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year. So this is the establishment of this feast. Now, the Jews ordained, that word actually means fulfilled. Wait a minute. 1,000 years before that, didn't they fulfill it? No. They accepted those laws. And they tried to live by those laws. But it hadn't really sunk in to the point where it became a heart thing, where they really were saying, this is more important. This is what we have to be like. We now understand. We now see. All right? So, this is why they're saying here at the time of Esther, they fulfilled this law. And then took upon themselves. So, we have a funny kind of order here. What's going on? The Megillah 9:27 tells us, Esther 9:27, that's Esther, tells us, Kimu v'kiblu. That's a Hebrew word. After being saved from Haman, the Jews fulfilled and accepted upon themselves the Torah anew. But it's a strange order. That should be what should be the order. They accepted upon themselves and fulfilled. No, they fulfill it this time because of the spiritual reality it becomes to them. So now, Well, back at the time, going back here, just one. We want to go back just for so we understand what was going on at Sinai real quick here. Hasidas, famous rabbi in history, explains that the meaning here is not that God literally forced them. That if you don't accept this, you will die. The point is this, that when the revelation came, it was so intense that people lost the ability to choose otherwise. And yet God wanted his people to make a choice. To make not just a logical choice, but a spiritual, spirit-led choice. All right? And now, well, we won't go into that, right? I won't go there with it. So overwhelmed by the awesome revelation, the experience of the truth of God, the rabbis say that you couldn't say no. This is at the time of Sinai. You couldn't say no. In that sense, they were forced. The yes that they said then was a yes that had no other possibility. But now, at the time of Esther, they are fulfilling that which a long time ago they had accepted under duress. So Purim is the completion now, this is the point, is the completion of the covenant at Sinai. And this is part of what it means when the rabbis say that Purim, that Yom Kippur, 1,000 years earlier when that was established, okay, when Moses goes up the mountain the second time, Yom Kippur is, ki in Hebrew means like. Like a Purim. Like a Purim, but not Purim itself. All right? But Purim ends up becoming even more significant because of the heart change that these people experience. That these people now are reaching out to God, not just because God is shaking a mountain over them and doing these supernatural things that they're or hearing a big shofar that's scaring them out of their wits. No, they are realizing, yes, our lives are in danger, but we blew it, and they did. We're going to find out what they did tonight, what they actually were doing. All right, we blew it. We did not follow your Torah, and how much that means for us now to do that. And we're going to follow a guy by the name of Mordecai, because Mordecai gives us an example of what's going on here, and we'll get to that at that point. Now I'm going to show you, this is the letter Hey in Hebrew. You know, many of you that have studied Hebrew or have seen this before, this is a Hey. A Hey is made of two letters. Hebrew is an incredible language, has phrases inside phrases, words within words, and letters inside letters. It's very, 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 not only multidimensional, it is very, very profound, and spiritually, just the depths of it are incredible, spiritually. In that letter stands for the Holy Spirit, that letter stands for grace, but you take there are two letters making that letter, a dalet and a yud. If you take those two letters that make that Hey, the yud and the dalet, they spell a word, and the word is yad. And yad is hand. And hand represents, remember this letter here, this letter is behold, grace, Holy Spirit, and also gift. Gift. The yad that spells, yod, dalet spells yad, represents in Judaism, the rabbis say it represents the Holy Spirit. The yad, the hand, represents the Holy Spirit. It also represents fire. The fire of God and the power of God, but not just the fire as it relates to power, but the fire of God's love, the holy fire that we're going to talk about more later on. I'm going to show you something. Anyway, we'll get to that when we get to that. Here's the Hey. All right. When the Hey for the word give is it's the holiest letter in the Hebrew alphabet. That's why when they spell God in English, they'll put G and then a hyphen and a D, because that represents that Hey. That's why they write it that way. Sinai on Shavuot is God reaching down for man. The Hey is man reaching up to God in worship. Giving representing Purim. Now here it is. There's the ancient Hey. This is the ancient Hey from the time of way back, even before Moses. This is the ancient Hey from the time of Abraham, back in there. It's Paleo-Hebrew, or what they call Proto-Canaanite. It is the first Hebrew. And the letter Hey looked like that. It looked like a man with his arms up worshiping God. All right? And you're going to find out something real incredible as this whole thing of worship also connects to Esther when you look at her and you look at her name. All right? We're not there yet. Where at Sinai it was heaven's open revelation, Purim was about concealment. Concealment, and yet God was still there. We're going to discover that. God was still there. It all took place in exile in the diaspora facing the threat of extinction. It was during that time of no revelation, no miracle. Now there were miracles, yes. But they were shrouded or clouded in natural kind of things. And yet the way they happened was all supernatural. But it was not the same kind of thing as the parting of the Red Sea and the big horn that shook the mountain. It wasn't that kind of thing. It was during that time of no revelation, no miracle, no overt miracle, where God is veiled and concealed. Not the high moments, rather the moments I'm not feeling anything. You're not stirring me. You're not drawing anything from me. You're not summoning forth anything. No, you're not. I'm giving myself unto you. That is the essence of marriage. It's a faith thing and real revelation of his love. Now, we're going to Judaism, they say that Purim is about these mems. There's different words that begin with the letter M in Hebrew. M in English and mem in Hebrew, it's like the same thing. It even sounds the same, and it is really the same, okay? But the four mems are the four M's. Mem has some very significant meaning as it relates to all this thing with Purim, and those two mems together spell mem, which if you look at it alphanumerically, it's the letter, or it's the number 80, because each mem is a 40. You put them together, and they're 80. Now, you notice the first one right here on the right, that's an open mem. There's an opening there. That's that. When you put that in a word in Hebrew, it's either at the beginning of the word or in the middle or somewhere inside the word. The M the mem that's put at the end of every word, if a word ends in the letter mem, it looks like this thing here, and it's closed. It's closed mem, completely closed, and we're going to discover what that's about. The Talmud says that the world has four directions. Three are closed, and the fourth is open. The fourth is the northern one. It's open, but in the Messianic era, it will close. The closed mem, this is what I want you to see here, means a unified domain where everything contained is embraced equally. All right? What we discover is that the closed mem is God's enveloping and folding our arms around us, forming what they call in Judaism the shepherd's pen, the place of ultimate safety, the place of ultimate freedom, the place of ultimate blessing. And in Hebrew, when they use the word for garden, it's gan. And gan represents this kind of a place that's actually a hedge. And it's a hedge that's a fiery hedge. There's fire all around it. All right? That's the shepherd's pen. The open mem is open, not unified. Represents something fragmented, scattered, lost in space. Redemption is closed. It's the shepherd's pen. The shepherd's pen. The Messianic era is called the year of the great Shabbos, Sabbath. All right? For Christians, it's on Sunday. For Jews, it's on Saturday. But it's still about the same idea of the holiness and this separate, set-apart time that's very sacred that we call Sabbath, or in Judaism they call it the Shabbos or Shabbat. All right? And, in fact, the Jews believe it's so sacred and so special, because God gave them the Sabbath, right? Mm-hmm. It's so special they call it a palace in time. They call it an oasis in time. They call it a time outside of time. It's that special. And on Shabbos, they say, is a foretaste of our world in God's embrace. It's a foretaste of our world in God's embrace. Every Shabbos is a foretaste of the closed mem, or that place, the shepherd's pen, the place of protection, the place of his arms enfolding us, surrounding us. That's why it's about community and family. It's about unity, being close and tight. So the whole purpose from the dawn of creation is to close the breach, for an open mem to become a closed mem. Okay, now we're going to go to our friend King Ahasuerus. This is the one that in history, the Greek name for him is Xerxes. Ahasuerus was the Persian name, and I'll refer to him also as in Hebrew name as Achashverosh. He's the king of the story, of the Megillah, the story. He's the king, and he rules, and here's his dates, 486 BC to 465 BC is when he is ruling. Couple interesting things, about the time of his rule is that's the time when there were these big battles with a lot of the Greeks. The famous Battle of Thermopylae, when Leonidas and his men, his 300 men, fought off the Persian army, and they were the big heroes of the day in Greek history. That was during the reign of this guy right here. All right. He is not the good guy that Hollywood makes him out to be. Hollywood way over romanticizes this guy. He was really not a good character. And when I start talking about him, your mind is gonna go to somebody else that we all know, and it's gonna be very interesting. All right, I won't say who it is. Be nice about it here, okay?
Think we know.
But I'm gonna relate that. I'm gonna relate that to something prophetic. You guys, a lot of you heard about. Well, you at least heard about Netanyahu's speech.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
You heard about it?
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you that happened right over Purim, and you're going to see that the players in that, prophetically,
Yes.
I'm going to show you something about that. Wait, I will get to that. Well, let's put it this way. I'll tell you this real quick so I don't lose it later on. But the Lord showed me the United States, this dude right here, King Ahasuerus.
Jeez.
Persia, Iran, Haman. Israel, Esther. Think of it that way.
Oh.
Now it's more than that,
Wow.
but that's what we got. Okay. The name Ahasuerus is a Persian in origin, and it means Lion King. Well, that can be good, right? The Lion King. And because Jesus was a lion of Judah, all right? Lion King. Achashverosh moved the capital of Persia to Shushan or Susa. And can everybody read that back there? Hopefully you can. Some of these things I had to make the font a little smaller. The smallest I went down to was 26, but I tried to make them at least 28. He had to, this is the king here. The king had to create some kind of grandeur for himself. And there's a medrash that's, where they actually say, now, before I go on with this, I'm going to be making some statements, and I'm going to be showing you some things, and I probably should have brought this up in the very beginning. And maybe I'm glad I didn't, because people came in so they get to hear this so that they didn't miss out on this. These things are in the Scripture. A lot of them you will recognize are from the book of Esther, right out of Esther. Or they're things that are being said in there, but they're said in the Hebrew, and in the English you're not getting it. That message is not going to come clearly through there because it's in Hebrew. When you get Hebrew, it's going to tell you things that you miss in the English. But it's not just that. There are other ancient Hebrew chronicles and histories. Now, not everything in these chronicles and histories are necessarily believable or right, but a lot of it is right, and a lot of it is good, and it helps us get a real clear, close understanding of what was going on at the time back then, so we really know the kind of things, and all these... For that reason. Okay. So, he creates some kind of grandeur for himself. And there's this medrash that talks about him that King Achashverosh emulated the throne of Solomon. Shlomo Melech, that's Solomon. In Shushan today it's called Shush. It's garbage dump, by the way. In 2009, the Iranian government turned this garbage dump, they turned it into a garbage dump. They were going to build a big hotel there. And make it a big tourist trap. But somebody decided, there's too many things here that points to things about the Bible and being true, and Jewish and Jewish. Oh, well, we better not do that. And so when they made the decision not to do it because it's too Jewish, well, I believe it was the Jewish thing, but I also believe there were things there that really confer and confirmed the Bible being true, and they didn't want that coming out. All right? So what did they do? They made a big dump, and they dug a big, huge crater hole and filled it with garbage. So nobody goes to Shush today. Shush, or Sus, is an ancient Persian city that is, it's 5,000 years old. It's one of the most ancient cities on the planet. All right? Now, here we go. Now, this is the kind of guy Ahasuerus is. I'm going to get into it. I'm going to talk about it. His strategy to life was, it's all about me. And it's all about what's expedient at the moment. Not what is good for the people or the nation. And that's the idea of true wickedness. True wickedness is absolute selfishness. He was smart, and he lived around the same time. And he knew that Nebuchadnezzar of Babel, had destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Beis HaMikdash's temple. He had destroyed the temple. He knew that it was prophesied that Nebuchadnezzar's empire would be destroyed, and he fully expected the Star of Israel to rise again. And now, 3 years later, according to his calculations, marks 70 years from the exile. And he's over there going, 70 years has passed, no temple, no Messiah, no return. Ahasuerus, and from that then he has this big party we're going to talk about. But Ahasuerus didn't owe the nobility anything because they didn't elect him. Many didn't even like him. They were terrified of him because he had the power. And he didn't have to fit himself in anyone else's program. He made the program.
Wow.
Some of you are kind of
That
getting
sounds
here.
like him, don't it?
All
A
right.
long time ago.
Yeah.
All right. 180 days of partying.
Yay.
Now, this is right in the Bible. The Bible tells you it was a party that lasted 180 days. King Ahasuerus was a party animal. Well, his wife was too, we discovered. All right? And he has this party. I'll go back and make sure right. Yeah, okay. He has this party for 180 days. The party was less to curry favor and more to send a very clear message. Here's the message. Look at me. Look at who I am. Look at the power that I'm going to be wielding. Now he has a second party for 7 more days. So his total party here at this time was 187 days.
Wow.
But the second party, the first party, who does he have there? He has all the Persian nobility and a lot of the military people. These big top people. In the second party, it was not about any... And in the first party, he has it where? He has it in the big courts of his palace, inside the courts. The second party is a garden party. Out in the garden terrace area, he has a party out there. And the purpose of that party, the ultimate purpose is going to be to get the Jews there, because he wants to get the Jews to compromise their faith. But he invites everybody to this party. All the people in the area of Susa and everybody around, you all come to this big party. And there's over 18,000 Jews alone who attended this party. Rashi, another one of the historical rabbinic leaders, does say the vessels used at the party were from the Beis HaMikdash. He uses the holy vessels from the temple at a secular worldly party. And the message he's sending to the nobility by giving the second party is, you're all the same to me from the highest to the lowest. I'm the great equalizer.
Sounds like Obama.
Yes.
A long time ago.
Ahasuerus, who was devious, had a target in planning all of this, and the target was the Jew. This party was pointedly made 7 days to include Shabbat. Yes. And he was certain that if he could get the Jewish people to sin and do things which would enrage God, that they would remain in galus. That word in Hebrew means exile. That they would remain in exile forever. And he wanted to phase the Jewish people out of existence. How? Now listen, he didn't want to phase them out, meaning to wipe them out and kill them all. Now Haman wants to do that.
Yeah.
In addition to this other stuff. Haman says, we're going to kill them all off. We're going to solve this problem once and for all. But he doesn't want to kill them all off. He's anti-Semitic but not traditional anti-Semitism, Napoleonic anti-Semitism. Now, what do we mean by that? Napoleon, lives in the modern times, late 18th, early 19th century, under the 1700s, early 1800s. Napoleon, we're going to find out some interesting things about Napoleon. We're going to go to Napoleon because I want to show you the parallel of the kind of a person the king was here, this Persian king. Napoleon wanted to reconstitute the Sanhedrin, to make himself the head of the Sanhedrin. He actually mints a coin of Moses bowing to him. Napoleon does, all right, in modern times. He wants to emancipate the Jews, but his ultimate goal was to secularize the Jews and assimilate the Jews, to get the Jews to be just like anybody else and everybody else, and give up their God and give up their unique and special thing that makes them unique, which is their personal, intimate, close relationship with God. Covenant marriage. The evil one, the enemy of our souls, the thing he hates more than anything about man is that concept of covenant. He hates that. Yeah. And the Jews are the ones that God used to bring us that understanding and that whole concept. All right. He wanted the Jews to be loved out of existence. Napoleon did. But so did Ahasuerus. So did the king of Persia. That was what he wanted. He wanted to welcome them into his royal environment. He wanted them to all sin and then become comfortable with their sin, the king of Persia here. And in doing so, he believed they would never go back to Israel, and Israel would never rise again, and then his empire would be cemented. And I've got it. And he says, if I force the Jews to eat non-kosher food, he has this big party. He has this great, big, huge spread, and he makes sure that he has a lot of kosher food there, but a lot of non-kosher food there. He does have kosher food at this celebration, but he has all the non-kosher food there. So the Jews are going to this party, and a lot of them are thinking, well, I don't want to be, I want to be liked by this. And a lot of them are eating this other stuff. He says, if I force them to drink non-kosher wine, it's not really a sin. If I force them to do it. So I need to create a set of circumstances that they will do this of their own volition. And that, says the Or HaChaim is another one of the historical rabbis, is the purpose of this party. Everything was designed around the 18,000 Jews. That was the whole plot and plan, was to get them there, to get them to compromise their faith, because then the king says or believes that the Jewish people will be under my sway now forever. Sounds like, well, not just the king saying that. It's his daddy saying that, who isn't God. And the second feast was not to display the king's might. He was not trying to impress anybody. This was the purpose of the first feast. This feast, the second feast, was done in a way to get the people involved, get them to participate, to get the people to do what I want them to do. So Mordecai doesn't go to that second feast. He's invited, right? He's a Jew. He doesn't go to the second feast. Because he knew that the most dangerous, insidious attack on his people, on the Jewish people, is not when we're forced to enter into a state of rebellion against God and his Torah, but rather it's when we're loved to death. And the older Rebbe, another one of the famous rabbinic authorities in history, says that the Tsar is better than Napoleon. Using things as an act of sacrilege. It's said that these ancient sources tell us that when he had this party, the second party, the king, he not only gets out all these sacred vessels from the temple for the people to drink out, which in itself was a total break of spiritual holy protocol for the Jew. Not only does he do that, but he dresses up in the high priest's garment. So they're seeing all this, and a lot of them are still going along with it. This should have been a stab in the heart of all every Jew present. Deep down, the rabbis teach that deep down, our enemies know we are different. And the more we try to say that we're exactly the same, the more that they start to think that there's some secret plot or protocol by an elder somewhere, And so, the Jew would say, we're not simply an ancient people, but an eternal people. That's also true of all God's people. All of us who are sons and daughters by faith of Abraham, we are all an eternal people. Ahasuerus is trying to create a new empire. Now look at this. Listen to this. He's trying to create. He's not fitting himself into the government that exists before. He doesn't intend to comport in accordance with the Constitution. He's going to write his own laws.
He had a cell phone too.
Emails.
Now, are you seeing the picture? I think a lot of you are, of who this is really looks like here, of somebody we've been dealing with. Okay. All right. He's going to do his own thing, and everybody's going to follow his lead. He's not bound by previous etiquette, agreement, or laws. He's doing away with Persian dominance. This is no longer, he believes, he says, this is no longer the empire of the Persians. It's rather my empire. It's the empire of Ahasuerus. He don't even care about the glory of Persia. He cares about Ahasuerus' glory. He's a real piece of work, this guy.
Sounds like Hitler too.
There's a spirit there, yeah.
Ahasuerus is a bigot. Doesn't like Jews. He's anti-Semitic. Now, maybe before, it's very possible with the influence of Esther on his life, that before, and actually when he died, history tells us that he was assassinated, so he was killed. Somebody killed him. But it's very possible that before he dies, maybe like his first wife's grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, maybe he becomes a righteous man and follows the one true God and things like that. We hope that all that happened through the influence of Esther. But through most of his career, even through most of the time, a huge percentage of the time with Esther, he's still this rotten, no good guy. But, all right, he's a bigot. He doesn't like Jews. He's a sexist. He can't stand women. He's nobody. He's a mutt who rises to prominence overnight. And killing his wife was an act of terror for the purpose of controlling the people.
Wow.
You said, wait a minute. He's a mutt. He's not a royal. He's not a royal. We're going to find out who he is. All right. He's in the kings. He's in the lineup of the kings of the Achaemenid dynasty, but he's not one of them. Who is he then? We're going to discover this right now. He was his initial connection to royalty was his position as a stable keeper for evil Merodach, the son of Nebuchadnezzar of Babel. All right. And due to political upheavals, he was able to maneuver into a position that allowed him to literally purchase the kingship.
Wow.
Purchase the kingship. Well, he can do whatever he wants with no compunction. He says, I no longer have people telling me this is how we do things in Persia. Now, this is what Ahasuerus does. I don't care what we do in Persia. Persia is no longer an issue. Like somebody said, well, I don't care what we do things in the United States. America. I don't care about the Constitution. Like, Lord help. Persia is no longer an issue. Whatever the previous kings did is irrelevant. Whatever the founding fathers did is irrelevant. No, okay, you get the picture. Whatever the founding. This is how we do it now. This is the kind. This is actually what the things he actually believed and said. All right. So in the meantime, he's purging the society of the upper echelon, the intelligentsia. He gets rid of these people. Well, who are they? They're going to be either people of high intellect or of charisma, or people who are charismatic people, high intellect people, EQs. They are very intuitive and understand human nature. And so that's what they always used to do. They arrested the poets, the playwrights, the professors, the laureates, take all of these people and get rid of them. Now, of course, today we understand if all these people are liberals or whatever, well, that's fine. But traditionally, historically, a lot of times these people were not that way. Sometimes they were that way. But if they are people who go against the grain, who are dissenting from the system, then we don't want them around. Even if they are the shakers and the movers, we get rid of them. They're going to stand in the way of progress, progressives, what they call them in our society today. This is the age of progressivism, right? Yeah, they're going to stand in the way. Well, we don't.
Hillary.
We'll get rid of them. Yeah.
Hillary.
Okay, Okay, here we go, Vashti. Now we're going to look at Vashti, the beautiful Vashti. The queen, his first wife. Now, Vashti, first of all, I want to tell you who she is. She's Nebuchadnezzar's granddaughter. Nebuchadnezzar's granddaughter. And she's a royal. All right? And she's and Ahasuerus, the king, says, I married you, Vashti, because you're beautiful, not because you're royal. And you're going to discover what goes on here is there's a power play between the king and the queen. They really, they're constantly trying to one-up each other with power play kind of thing. And Ahasuerus' attitude, and what he would say is, you're a queen because I make you a queen. Vashti's response is, I'm the real royal here. Remember, you're a stable boy. All right? And the Gemara tells us that Vashti was a vicious anti-Semite, just like her husband. She was an anti-Semite. In fact, here's what she would go around do. She would force Jewish girls to work in her house on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
She knew what it was.
Yeah.
She forced them to work on the Sabbath. And to demean them, she would strip them naked while they were working.
Oh.
Now, King Ahasuerus has a party. The king in the story of Esther has a party. And he calls the people. Now, in the Hebrew, it's there. But you're not getting it in the English. But it's there, and it's in the scripture. He's calling the people, or he's calling Esther, or calling Vashti, not Esther. He's calling Vashti to come to entertain the people at the party. But the point is, he's telling her to come without wearing anything but her crown. You come in the nude. You come naked and prance around in front of all these old boys here at the party and show yourself off. And she was a beautiful woman. Now, she wasn't just a beautiful woman. History and these things tell us that she was highly promiscuous and very, very, this woman was, all right, she was a whore type woman, all right? Very promiscuous. All right? She was to come before the king's party wearing nothing but a crown, so why didn't she want to do this? All right, well, it wasn't. Yeah, she could have been spiteful and saying, because I don't, you're telling me to do this, so I'm just going to get, and just going to be nasty about this and not do it, and be rebellious here with this whole power play that was going on between them. But in a Vashti, that was an opportunity. In a Vashti, it was an opportunity for her to go out and parade herself and do this kind of thing. So why didn't she do it? She didn't do it because all of a sudden this happened to her. She had this terrible skin disease right before she was supposed to go out and come before the king. Terrible skin disease suddenly spread all over her, and she was embarrassed. And one of the accounts says she even grew a tail that looked like a lizard. Now, whether that's true or not, the skin disease, yes, I believe. The lizard part, maybe not. But the skin disease, yes. Okay. Because the Jewish people, now, what is that telling us? Before I go on, she was demeaning these Jewish girls, making them strip naked. What does she ask to do? She's asked to be stripped naked, and then she's given this terrible disease because of what she did.
Yeah.
You think about it, people. That God has a way of dealing with people.
Oh, yes, he does.
All right?
Yep.
Because the Jewish people were always very careful. Now, what I'm going to get into here, before I read this off to you, before we talk about this, here's the king. By law, she didn't come to him in that party. She was supposed to come to him the last day of the party. See, that was another thing that was a big sacrilegious, very, very adulterous, evil thing to the Jewish nation and their relationship with God. Is he's having the queen come before the king's court naked on Shabbos, on Sabbath, on the holiest day of their calendar.
Yeah.
All right? Well, the king, he, all right, the king, he says, okay, yeah, well, according to Persian law, I have to kill her. Persian law says if the king commands someone come before him and they don't do it,
Yep.
off with their head.
Dead.
All right? But it was Vashti. Now Vashti, the king loved Vashti, but his love for Vashti was sensual kind of love. It was eros love, and the Greek word for it is sensual kind of love. He really liked this woman. He was really taken with Vashti, and guess what? He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it. He wanted to do it on the one hand because he was offended. He says, well, yeah, we're going to, but then later on he's going, oh boy, this is Vashti, and I really don't want to do this. So he finds a people, and he's got 127 provinces in his empire, his kingdom. 127 provinces, and all these different, Persia is a melting pot of all these different tribes and people groups. Okay, I'm going to have to go to the Jews, the ones I don't like. I'm going to have to go to them to get me off the hook here with Vashti, and there's a reason for that. Because the Jews were very fair and compassionate in their laws. Now we're going to look at something tonight. And we're going to have you jump ahead 500 years and look at some other Jew that was put on trial. But we're not, when we get to that, I'll tell you to do it. Because the Jewish people were always very careful, afraid, even of issuing capital punishment. The rabbis said that from the days of the temple, the Beis HaMikdash, from when it was destroyed in 70 years, at that time, we don't know how to deal with these kinds of issues because the criminal court of the Jewish people could only function when the Jewish court of the temple is standing. It was no longer standing. And if a court would put somebody to death once in 7 years, another opinion was once in 70 years, the Jews called it a bloody court. In fact, they would actually say that the sword with which a person is killed is buried. They would bury the sword. No one is allowed to see it again, so as to say that this sword that so-and-so was killed with, they didn't want them to even go there and think about that and gloat over that and so on. When someone's life is hanging in the balance, now this is according to the Jewish law then, and even before that, all through the ancient Jewish history, when somebody's life's hanging in the balance, we never start with the Chief Justice. We start with the lower justices so they will not be influenced by the words of the Chief Justice. When it comes to convictions of life and death, convictions of life and death, one majority is not enough. There has to be two in the majority. The first one who has to speak at the court, now listen to this, has to say a reason why he shouldn't be put to death. If it's unanimous, they can't put him to death. Somebody has to find merit. They can never convict with circumstantial evidence. Never, it's impossible. Jump 500 years into the future from this time of Queen Esther, the king of Persian king. And we have a trial of another Jew. When Jesus was put on trial, think of how far they went out of their way to break protocol and doing what they did, considering this is what they really believed about the law.
He wasn't tried in the temple court.
Yep, that's right. Okay. Ahasuerus really did not want to kill Vashti, and so he figures that the Jews would find a way to bring about a leniency, a legal loophole. They will find a way with the tones of criminal justice to let the old girl off the hook. And now we're introduced to, it talks in the book of Esther about these 7 princes. They're 7 cronies. They're not royals, and they're not even nobility. These aren't the noble people. All right? And one of them's name is Memucan. His name is right there in the book. All right? Memucan, though, is actually this guy. We call him Haman, or Haman, as you refer to him as. Mamukin, he's called this because he's always ready to bring something bad about somebody. His default was strife and bad things. So the guy had just, he was just a real negative kind of a person. And the Medrash actually says that this was an example of what we call hediot kopus berosh. The commoner has no sense of propriety and pushes himself into the front. Oh well. The Gemara says that Vashti really, now listen to this, really hated Haman, disliked him, and demeaned him because she went and slapped him in the face with a shoe. And so, he's going to counsel the king to kill Vashti. He's going to say, you need to kill her. You know, it doesn't matter what these Jews say. You need to kill her. And the reason is, he insults, or Vashti not only insults him by slapping him with the shoe, but he insults his wife. By the way, his wife's name's given in there too, but his wife, because she wasn't invited to the party. So he doesn't call together, with this whole matter of what we do with Vashti, he doesn't call together the wise people who understood the mores of the land and the ethos and politics of the civilization, because those are people who usually keep the king in check. Rather, he calls his cronies, or maybe what, his czars? Oh, well.
There you go.
Anyway. Okay, Mordecai.
Right on, David.
Okay, Mordecai at the gates. Okay, now we're going to look at our friend Mordecai. We're going to talk about Mordecai. In Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai. This is actually from the scripture, Esther 2:5. The son of Yair, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Kish of Benjamin. We discover why all this genealogy is given. I will say this. When genealogy is given in the scripture, it's not given just to sound pretty or just to say words. There's a reason why. Okay, when they give the genealogies. And we're going to and you're going to find out how significant that is just in looking at Mordecai, because we'll talk about some of that. All right, a great Jewish leader, who Mordecai was, is one who cares for the small needs of the individual, unlike many of the non-Jewish leaders who are concerned only by the newsworthy great problems of the entire nation. They call Mordecai the Jew. This is for the first time in history, and the first time in Scripture, is the reference to a man being called a Jew. Now, there was Judah, obviously, back at the time of Torah, in ancient times, clear back, with Judah, the son of Jacob. He was the first Judah. All right, but the first time that they refer to a man being called a Jew, and the word is Yehudi, is here with the story of Esther and Mordecai. Oops. Okay. And the word Jew is created in the book of Esther. Until then, Jews were called the children of Israel, Bnei Israel. Because the word Yehudi is from Yehuda, which means praise and acknowledgement. Judah is from the word Yada, which means to shoot an arrow and worship with extended hands. Remember the hay? Extended hands. So what do we got in the whole concept of a Jew and Judah is the concept of a war and a wedding feast. A warrior bride. A warrior bride. A warrior wedding feast.
Good word.
When you put the yud in front of a word, it means continuous and constant. The yud is in front of God's name, Yod He Vav He, Yahweh, Jehovah. It's in front of that. It's also in front of Yeshua, Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin.